Hi, my name is Megan Stevens, and this is my Sports Performance Strategies Sport-Specific Program Design presentation. My client is Julia. She is 17 years old. She is trying to improve her 200-meter short course freestyle swim in order to receive an NCAA scholarship. Now, if you look at her data, which I've put on my presentation here, it shows that she is exceptional in her start, almost beating her peers by a full second, so 0.9 of a second. But her second and her third turn is where she loses speed and power. So that is my focus. So in order to improve those two times, we need to improve her overall power output. And then we need to be able to maintain that level of power, which can be quite tricky. But first, we have to look at swimming as a sport and what it entails, and then move through things, okay? So in terms of swimming, it's definitely an upper body dominant exercise. Using the arms, shoulder, and kind of chest in order to do the swim strokes, any kind, but we're going to focus on the freestyle stroke. And then we also need a high level of core strength, right? Because we all know that's where, first of all, power is derived from. And also the core is kind of the beginning of the shoulder complex. You know, the core has the chest muscles in it, which are very important to that motion, connects the rotator cuff and everything. Then we have the back, which is hugely important, okay? And then in terms of what is needed for competitive swimming, very high level of aerobic system strength, as well as anaerobic strength and power. Now, deriving power without ground reaction forces like hockey or soccer is very, very challenging. So what we need to do is use the start and the 3 turns and be able to get maximum power out of those and maintain it through after 25 meters length. So that can be quite challenging. But before that, we need to look at the technical skill, which will be done by the swim coach. But I think at this higher level that she is trying to achieve, we need one-on-one swim coach training. So I don't think she should add more swimming. I just think it should be one-on-one and technique specific, as well as getting those, the full length of training. So we shouldn't add more than her 7 days a week training. It should just be more specified with one-on-one, as well as maybe the club training as well. When it comes to swimming, it's a learned skill. It's not like running, where as a strength and conditioning coach, you just take the client's running ability and you extend it. With swimming, it's a learned behavior. So she's been training for 6 years, which would mean she started at 11, which is actually quite old. A lot of like Olympic level swimmers started at like 6, like Kate Ledecky, 2-time Olympian by the time she was 20. I kind of refer back and forth to her stats because, I'm sure that Julia is looking at this young lady's performance and wants to be like that. So that's kind of why I brought up the one-on-one stroke, or like the stroke technique specific, because I've read a few articles about Kate Ledecky, and she changed, modified, and improved her stroke technique, and that it was kind of like the deciding difference. And then she also, it's been logged that she does 8,000 meters in a 2.5-hour swim time. That's a lot of shoulder rotations. Okay, so the first macro cycle will be focused on that shoulder joint stability and then strength, as well as the core stability and then strength. Okay, because without those two things first, we're not going to build any strength or power, because there is a risk of kind of injury. This is just an example of Kate Ledecky's training when she was only 15 years old, and it's quite intense. And then before we start with Macrocycle 1, we're going to be doing certain tests. So we're going to do the vertical jump test, and Kate Lidnicky's was 39 inches. So that's kind of like a goal to try to reach with her. We definitely need to know her maximum strength for her bench press because it's an upper body strength test. We also need to know her max strength on her squat because if you look at the start and the turn, it's a triple extension of the lower body in order to drive power on those, I think you have 4 times in her 200-meter short course race to develop power with ground reaction forces, right? So it's our only time to use that, and so we want to maximize that. We'll also be doing a core endurance test that I have borrowed from an article. I just think it's fantastic. And then we're also going to be doing a 100-meter sprint test. Now, the reason behind this is because we want to get her faster, but we don't want to add any more time to her swimming. So there is an aspect of dry land anaerobic testing and training that we are going to do in Macrocycle 1 and 3. And I think it's important to have that aspect because you can train the anaerobic energy system, obviously with strength training, power training, Olympic lifting, and plyometrics. But we want to be able to push that athlete's ability and speed without putting her in the pool anymore. And then just in terms of the injuries, we need to make sure that we don't add any more injuries. So we want to keep that volume in the pool no more than it already is. And then just before we start there as well, let's talk about Julia's strengths. So her start has great power, and her first turn has great power. Okay, like I've already said, her VO2 max is very, very high, just like her competitors. And then some other kind of, not really anything to do with training, but her there's certain aspects of her size that are really advantageous. So she's 6'2". That means that if somebody is going at the same speed as her in the pool, but is 4 inches shorter, Julia is going to reach the pool first. Furthermore, her wingspan is 8.5 centimeters longer than her competitors. And if we talk about, say, Michael Phelps, he has a huge wingspan and that can attribute to she can stroke less, right? Her stroke rate will be lower, but her stroke length will be longer. Okay, so there's certain, you can manipulate variables there. Her weaknesses are again in that second and third turn. So that has to do with anaerobic metabolism, her power capacity. So we're going to be developing her alactic capacity so she can drive power longer and repeatedly. Okay, and then her weight may be a weakness. She is 6'2", and she is 17, so she's past puberty. However, we need to know what her weight consists of. So we'll just be doing lean body tests. So in terms of Macrocycle 1, like I said, joint strength and stability is first. Shoulder joint strength and stability, core strength, and then some dry land speed training. Okay. And then, of course, it's always important to include and to reinforce that a warm-up and a cool-down and a daily stretching program is essential to an athlete because injuries and athletic careers, and hers is just at a critical stage, and we want to maintain, we want her to be able to progress actually in her athletic career. And then this is just the core stability strength test. And it's just it's the plank with the variations of taking away a limb in order to see how long an athlete can hold it. And then we have her sprinting test. And then her shoulder stability. So we've got internal and external rotation, and then what's called a catch, it's clearly to get that scoop and to be able to drive power with this lower part of your shoulder kind of capsule, your serratus anterior. Your armpit is a huge part of your shoulder joint. You need to be able to train that too. And then training with elastic bands and internal and external rotation, it maintains the resistance and the tension throughout the whole range of motion, which is incredibly key for the shoulder joint in terms of increasing stability, and then strength with some of these other movements that work towards the bottom of the page here, and they're done in order, right? Because we want people to be stable, then strong, and then drive power. I'm probably going to say that a few more times. And then we have the core stability that we need to work. So it's again, we've got some planks in there, a glute bridge, the bird dog to be able to, you know, move all the levers of the body independently and in synchronicity. And then we have some core strengthening exercises, which are fairly intense. Decline sit-ups, V-ups. Good mornings are really great for the middle back and the core, you know, and then the pike on the stability ball. It kind of mimics that turn in terms of drawing your body up and then driving it around, but the pike really brings it up. You know, using those muscles in the back and the core to kind of fold in the center, which is quite challenging. And then obviously we increase the intensity in those exercises. And then the speed work that we're doing dry land is really important. So it'll be 20 seconds as fast as she can go, recording that time. And then 60 seconds of aerobic recovery, a very, very slow jog, repeated 5 times and then rest. Okay, it's really important to not give full rest after those sprints because we want to be able to drive power after a little bit of aerobic exercise too, right? Those energy systems obviously are all working, you know, together at the same time, but we want to be able to push one and use the other one in terms of recovery. You know, and then in the adaptation week, after 3 weeks of strength and stability in the core and the shoulder, the adaptation week is when we're going to use, is what we're going to use to test. So we need to test that bench press, the maximum lift she can do there, in order to put that data into the proper loads to put on her next exercises that I'll talk to. And we need to know how strong she is in her squat, because the squat, triple extension, right, is the same as the start and the turn. If you kind of look at videos of that, it mimics the same motion, and we need to be able to drive power, you know, up and out in those positions. And then the reason we're doing the 1 RM deadlift is I want to see how strong that core and that back is. And that's just a kind of the chart, easy to understand. Macro cycle 2 is really, really intense in terms of strength training. We are going to be doing heavy lifting, so potentiation, which is kind of like plyo work, and then Olympic lifting. So this is really intense, obviously on the body. You have to remember it's intense on the brain too, and you have to remember the total training volume that this client has, as well as school. She has decreased her school and made it kind of work so she's in school year round, no like kind of crash times, so that's very advantageous to us. However, we have to remember, you know, the total volume, right? So we were actually in macro cycle 2, we're taking away the dry land sprint training, okay, because the data that we collected from her first macro cycle we'll give back to the swim coach, and he can start working on, you know, speed drills and that kind of thing, while we focus on strength and get in order to prepare for that fully specific power phase coming up in the next macro cycle. Okay, so we're going to be doing a pyramid, 50, 60, 70% in the back squat, bench press, forward lunge, reverse lunge, and then the leg press, and each 8 reps, and you can look in the program design, will be followed by a decreased amount of kind of plyo movements. Now, the reason I've done this because I was reading studies, and it shows that an athlete can improve its power output quicker if you put kind of a plyometric exercise after a heavy regular lift. Okay, so it's not the focus plyometrics, but we're using that potentiation rule to train the athlete's ability to drive power after fatigue, which is key, again, because the second and the third turn is where she loses power. So we're training that client to peak and then maintain and then kind of peak. It's very, very challenging. Another thing to note here in macro cycle 2 is that we're going to maintain 2 core exercises and 2 shoulder health exercises. in order to make sure that those adaptations that we had in the first macrocycle are maintained. Okay. So when you look at her, like just her back squats, we'll do 60%, 70%, 80%, and then decrease the reps down, just like a traditional pyramid. Okay. And then we're going to be doing the body weight squat with the body weight jump squat with the squat, and then the bench throw with the bench press. And then as we move down, okay. And then we have, Olympic lifting on Thursdays. Now, Olympic lifting really challenges the athlete's ability to drive power while doing a very technical move. So, swimming and turning, right? Lots of power, lots of technique. So, Olympic lifting is prime for that, especially, you know, like the cleans, the clean and jerks, that kind of stuff, right? How to be able to drive power in your upper body quickly and effectively and technically. Okay. And then for the adaptation week, so macro cycle 4 of macro cycle 2. Okay, so we're going to be doing that lean body test to see what we've accomplished there in improving muscle mass. The vertical jump test, let's see how much of an increase we've made there. And then we're only going to do 1 day of Olympic lifting, okay, just to maintain that. And then the testing is kind of training as well. You have to remember that testing takes energy, and time is very limited in this program, okay? So, and there's just the chart, the kind of overview of macrocycle 2. It is very intense. We're actually not doing any speed work, dryland training, because of the intensity of the lifting program, between the traditional weightlifting coupled with the potentiation, and then the day of Olympic lifting, which is very intense. Okay, and then we have macro cycle 3, plyometrics, the best way to increase power in athletes. Also, very, very challenging, and there is a definite requirement of base strength before you do that, or you will injure yourself. Once you see my videos, you will kind of see why. And with this type of training, a big thing that I learned is that just because we're training athletes doesn't mean that we have to do or be able to perform like them, you know? So demo exercises, maybe don't demo them yourself. Use videos, that kind of stuff too, so you don't hurt yourself and take yourself out of the equation, and then your athlete is left kind of in the dark. That was a very important thing for me to learn. You know, Sports Fitness Advisor says that athletes should be able to complete a 1 rep maximum squat at least 1.5 times their body weight. So that's kind of our parameter. Have we met that? What can we do? And I know with this type of program, we can maintain that, or we can obtain that in macro cycle 2. It's very important, you know, again, because we do not want to injure her in the plyometrics. So joint stability, joint strength, core stability, core strength, base strength, maximum strength, power, right, with those potentiation and Olympic lifting. And now macro cycle 3 is all about power and speed with plyometrics, and we're bringing back that speed training, dryland once a week. Okay, so with macro cycle 3, we've just got upper body plyometric choices, okay? So the plyo push-up, we've got burpees, chest pass, around the world drills, because you want to be able to drive power in all different directions, right? Because if you look at her turn, that's a lot, okay? And then what's going to be the thing with the plyometrics is we're going to be doing one upper body plyometric exercise, and then we're going to contrast with a lower body one, just to be able to maximize the time in the sessions and to get both bodies. And then we're giving 48 to 72 hours of rest in between, and that is so key for the body, especially, as well as the brain, because plyometric training is very difficult on the brain. And then another thing that I put in there is just at the end, I picked 2 of the hardest upper body and lower body ones, and you put those at the end, and it's a true test of the athlete's ability. And if anybody knows athletes, they love to push themselves. And as a strength and conditioning coach, you have to keep that always in the back of their head, that it's all about the competition, it's all about performance. So each session should play a little bit on that self-competitive nature, because once you look at swimming, you know, it's not like soccer or hockey where you're looking at your opponent and reacting to them. What you're doing is your internal clock is guiding you, and you push yourself. Okay, so with a swimmer, you have to find those ways to push them and to get them to really get in their own head and really push themselves. Okay, and then here's my videos of just the exercises. And then I just kind of want to basically talk about the taper. Now the taper, I read an article, and the taper, it should be about 10 days at this level. And it's just, so what I did was 10 days before August 1st, she'll be doing just 2 days of strength and plyometrics, very, very basic, and then doing some core work, and just to maintain all those training adaptations that we've made. But we have to decrease the load. We need to do that so athletes kind of mentally recover. We'll use that time to get her looked at by physiotherapists, athletic therapists, get massages done, the relaxation, the sensory deprivation, because that's all very important. The last week before competition is a lot of mental prep and kind of stress management in terms of what it's going to feel like that day, you know? And I think it's really important to remember that with athletes. And it's very, very interesting how we can play with all these different training variables and make them into a well-rounded program, you know, kind of in any time frame. And I'm just grateful for all this knowledge. Thank you.